What's up everyone, welcome to the 5th tutorial in our PyPlot course. Here we're going to work with multiple graphs and we'll study how to add multiple graphs either to a single plot or as subplots. So we'll start by plotting multiple datasets on a single graph, and then we'll create multiple subplots so that each one is its own separate graph. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, last time we finished off with customizing our graph by adding title and axes. I know I said that we should always be adding title and axes, but again, just because this is the tutorials and we're focusing on different topics, we're not going to bother doing that for the rest of our graphs, unless of course you really want to. So, let's go ahead and get started with a new cell here, okay? And the first thing that we'll want to do is learn how to add multiple plots, or multiple data sets rather, to a single plot. You'll very often want to do this if you're comparing two sets of data, so you don't necessarily want them side by side, you want them both mapped onto the same plot so that you get that direct comparison. Now for this, we're going to create two different sets of data. I have some random values here, but I'm also going to create two more random values, so x can remain the same. Basically what I'm going to do here is just copy this and we're going to paste it down here. So I'm going to say y1 and then y2, y1 here, and then y2. Okay, and then we're basically just going to add the same thing to y2, so we should end up with two different data sets. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll just run that cell. Okay, good stuff. So we've got those. Let's add in a new cell. We now have two completely different sets of data to deal with. So we'll start by plotting the first one. So we'll do plt.plot and we'll do x versus y1, okay? And then we'll give this a specific appearance. So let's do something like blue x's, okay? And then we're going to also plot an additional plot. So you can actually do plt.plot again, but it's probably easier just to add it in like this. So you can add in basically one set of data and then the other set of data. So we could do x again because the x values should remain the same. The y values, however, are different, and we want to make sure that we can differentiate between the two. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go for a nice Christmassy kind of feel. So we're going to do green x's here, and we're going to do red dots. So we could do like red O's or something. Okay, and then as per usual, we'll do plt.show. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. And as you can see, we now have two sets of data plotted on the same graph. Now these are scatter plots again because we're not doing anything with the line. Let's say we did want to actually do the line itself. We can actually just copy this. Maybe I'll start a new cell just to kind of keep that one alive. And let's just do a green line and a red line. Okay. In this way, you could definitely, I mean, this is really messy, but you could, if you had real data, you could definitely put them side by side like this, or rather one on top of the other, and it makes for a very easy comparison, see how the data is similar and how it's different. Now, it's not always the case that we'll want to do this. Sometimes we don't want the data on the same plot. In this example, it's actually very messy and hard to read anything. So what we could do here is have two plots side by side, or one on top of the other. And that would make it easier for us to kind of tell what's going on. For that, we need to create some subplots. So once again, we'll start up a new cell here. And instead of doing plt.plot, we're going to start with actually a plt.subplot. Now, subplot isn't going to be used to graph, like let's say x versus y. The subplot function is going to be used to specify how many subplots we should have in the overarching plot. So what we do here is we do the number of rows, the number of columns, so let's just say row, column, okay, and then the index. All right. So let's say, for example, I wanted two rows. So I wanted the graphs one on top of the other. So I do two rows, I do only one column, and the index is the very first one because that's kind of what, well, we have to start at the first one. And then we go on to specify our information. So then we can do plt.plot. Okay, we'll just do x and y, and I don't know, we can do red here. All right, and then this is the first one. Now we want to add in our second plot. And actually, you know what? Let's give this guy a title as well. So we're going to do plt.title, and this is going to be graph 1. All right, so we will now add the second one. In fact, weirdly enough, we're actually going to copy the subplot because, again, we want to specify rows and columns, but now we're dealing with a second graph. Okay, so second index here. So now we're going to add the title graph 2, and actually, you know what, we'll do a y1, and we'll do y2 there, just so that we have the two different ones. So we can do red, you know what, I'm kind of messing up here. We could do red here, and then green like this, okay? And then at the end, we're going to do plt.show. Okay? Now, before we run this, we might want kind of like an overarching title that is going to be used for the entire plot and all the subplots. So for that, we'll do a plt.subtitle, kind of like super title, and then this will be both of our graphs. Let's just call this graphs. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. As you can see, we now get the overarching title graphs. We get the title of graph 1, graph 2. I know it's kind of messy, so ideally we'd add some spacing in there. But you can see that the graphs are displayed one on top of the other. So we can do pretty much the same thing if we want them side by side. So let's copy this. We'll start up a new cell, and I'll just demonstrate that. So in this case, if we want them side by side, we actually only have one row but two columns. Okay, like this. Otherwise, it's pretty much exactly the same. Okay, so again, one row, two columns like this. It kind of compresses the data just to kind of fit them in side by side, but this might be a cleaner representation than this, depending on what you're going for. So I think the titles and stuff are kind of squished, and that doesn't look great, but this is easier to see the data in this particular case than this. Be easier to kind of compare the trends. So here we just have one row and two columns, or one column and two rows, but you definitely are not limited to just those numbers. You can have, let's say, a 2x2 plot if you want. You can have 10 plots if you want. Okay, just make sure that you are specifying the corresponding index each time you go to plot something, and each time you have to specify a new set of plotting. Okay, again, subtitle is the super title for the entire plot itself rather than each of just the subplots. Otherwise, you can just kind of specify the title for each subplot like that. Okay, so that is actually pretty much all we wanted to cover here. We're not really going to get into the customization of these, such as the spacing and everything. I'll leave that for you guys to check out yourself. Just know that you can plot multiple things on one plot by doing things like this. Okay, just make sure you specify all of your line 1 attributes and then all of your line 2 attributes. Okay, and we saw the same thing up here just with scatter plots. And then you can either stack your graphs, or have multiple columns in a single row, or you can do a combination and have kind of like a graph matrix. Okay, so play around with that a bit, and when you're ready to move on, we will cover some different types of graphs. Okay, so stay tuned for those. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next ones.